There was palpable fear in the hearts of people in the streets of the city at night. One man...
New York City, 1976. The streets were alive with disco, but someone turned the city's nightlife into a nightmare. A serial killer was operating, picking his victims at random, leaving behind terrified citizens and a string of cryptic letters.
I became an animal.
He was SonOfSam, one of the most infamous killers in American history. Welcome back to Prison Stories. In this video, we'll uncover the terrifying reign of the SonOfSam, who he was, and how he held New York City in fear. It began from Bronx. On the night of July 29th, 1976, 18-year-old Donna Lauria and her friend, 19-year-old Jody Valenti, were sitting in a parked car outside Donna's home after night out. As they talked, an unknown man approached the vehicle. Without warning, he pulled out a .44 caliber revolver and fired multiple shots. Donna was struck and killed instantly, while Jody was wounded but managed to survive. The attack seemed random, with no clear motive, leaving investigators puzzled. Witnesses described the shooter as a young man with dark hair, fleeing the scene on foot. At the time, police had no idea they were dealing with the beginning of a brutal killing spree that would terrorize New York City for over a year. Nearly 3 months later, on October 23rd, another attack occurred, this time in Queens. 20-year-old Carl DeNaro and his friend, Rosemary Keenan, were sitting in a parked car when a man approached and opened fire. Carl was struck in the head but miraculously survived after undergoing surgery to replace part of his skull with a metal plate. Rosemary escaped with minor injuries. Like the first attack, there was no clear motive.
There's no rhyme or rhythm or reason.
Victims had no known connections to the first shooting. Police began to suspect that the two incidents might be linked, but with little evidence and no eyewitness description of the shooter, the case remained frustratingly open. Meanwhile, the SonOfSam's reign of terror was far from over. Just a month later, on November 27, 1976, in Queens, the killer struck again. This time, 16-year-old Donna DeMazy and 18-year-old Joan Lomino were walking home late at night when a man approached them, pretending to ask for directions. Without warning, he pulled out a gun and fired. Both young women were struck by bullets, and while they survived, Joan was left permanently paralyzed from the waist down. The brazen nature of the attacks heightened fears across the city. The police were now dealing with a pattern. Young women, often in pairs, being attacked without reason. The SonOfSam was getting bolder, and the terror was just beginning. As the new year began, the killer showed no signs of stopping. On the night of January 30th, 1977, 26-year-old Christine Freund and her fiancé, John Deal, were sitting in their car in Queens after watching a movie. Suddenly, shots rang out. Christine was struck twice and later died from her injuries, while John miraculously survived. The attack further solidified the growing panic. Police now publicly acknowledged that a serial shooter was on the loose, targeting young women in parked cars. However, they still had no leads on who was behind the attacks. Fear gripped the city as residents wondered where the killer would strike next. The terror continued on March 8, 1977. The same gun was used on a college student in Virginia, Voskerikian. She was walking home from school in Queens. She was just a block away from her house when the killer struck. A single shot to the head ended her life instantly. The crime was brutal. And even more chilling was the fact that Virginia had instinctively raised her textbooks to shield herself, but the bullet tore straight through. This murder reinforced police suspicions that they were dealing with a serial killer. Ballistics confirmed that the same .44 caliber revolver had been used in multiple attacks, officially linking the cases together. The city was now fully aware that a ruthless murderer was roaming the streets, striking without warning. With growing media attention, public fear reached new heights. Women were advised to change their routines, avoid being outside alone at night, and even cut or dye their hair, as rumors spread that the killer was targeting brunettes.
And most of the girls are wearing their hair up because they're afraid of the 44 caliber killer.
Despite the increased police presence, the son of Sam was still out there, and he was not finished. On April 17th, 1977, the killer struck again, this time in the Bronx. 19-year-old Alexander Esau and his girlfriend, 18-year-old Valentina Suriani, were sitting in a parked car when shots were fired. Both were hit in the head at close range and died. But this attack came with something different. A letter left near the crime scene, addressed to NYPD Captain Joseph Borelli. In the chilling note, the killer referred to himself as the son of Sam for the first time. The letter was filled with taunts, bizarre references, and a twisted sense of justification for his crimes. As the media published portions of the letter, the city's fear turned to hysteria. The killer was no longer just a shadowy figure. He was communicating, playing a psychological game with the police and the public. The first letter was only the beginning. Over the next few months, the son of Sam sent more messages, taunting the authorities and boasting about his killings. He made cryptic references to an entity named Sam, who supposedly controlled him. The letters were riddled with spelling errors and odd phrases, but their meaning was clear. This was a man reveling in the terror he was causing. With pressure mounting, the NYPD launched Operation Omega, one of the largest manhunts in New York history. Hundreds of officers were assigned to the case, and psychological profilers attempted to piece together a portrait of the killer. But who was Son of Sam? Police had little idea at that time that 23-year-old David Berkowitz was behind this terror. David Berkowitz was just another face in the crowd. Born Richard David Falco in 1953, he was adopted as an infant by a loving middle-class couple, Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz. Despite a relatively normal upbringing, Berkowitz struggled with feelings of abandonment, isolation, and deep-seated resentment. As he grew older, his troubled mind took a darker turn. He developed a fascination with fire and reportedly set hundreds of small fires across New York City, keeping detailed records of each one. By his early 20s, he had become obsessed with the idea that demons were speaking to him, pushing him toward violence. After serving in the U.S. Army, Berkowitz returned to New York. Feeling even more disconnected from society, he joined secret satanic societies. On the night of July 31st, 1977, the son of Sam struck for the last time. 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz and her boyfriend, Robert Villani, were sitting in a parked car in Brooklyn when the killer approached and fired his .44 caliber revolver. Stacy was fatally wounded, while Robert was permanently blinded in one eye.
Year-old Robert Villani.
This attack was different. It took place in Brooklyn, unlike his previous shootings in the Bronx and Queens. The NYPD had already increased patrols in areas where the killer was likely to strike, but what ultimately led to his downfall was a small but crucial detail: a parking ticket. A woman who had been walking her dog near the crime scene that night noticed a suspicious man loitering near a yellow Ford Galaxy. She reported it to the police, and investigators discovered that the vehicle had been ticketed for illegal parking near the crime scene. The car was registered to a man named David Berkowitz, a 24-year-old postal worker from Yonkers. When detectives looked into Berkowitz, they found more red flags. A few of his neighbors had reported strange behavior, including him talking about demons and acting erratically. As police gathered more information, they became convinced they had found their suspect. On August 10, 1977, police arrived at Berkowitz's apartment in Yonkers. Inside his car, they found a rifle, maps of crime scenes, and another SonOfSam letter, seemingly prepared for future use. When officers knocked on his door, Berkowitz greeted them with an eerie smile and said, "Well, you got me." Upon searching his apartment, they found more disturbing evidence. Diary entries detailing his crimes and more writings filled with bizarre references to Sam. Berkowitz quickly confessed to being the son of Sam, but offered chilling explanation. He claimed that his neighbor's black dog, owned by a man named Sam Carr, was possessed by a demon and had commanded him to kill. While this bizarre claim initially sparked speculation about his sanity, experts later determined that he was fit to stand trial. Even after his arrest, David Berkowitz remained in the public eye. His eerie calmness, bizarre claims of demonic possession, and the sheer brutality of his crimes fascinated and horrified the nation. His notoriety even led to legal changes. The SonOfSam laws were introduced to prevent criminals from profiting off their crimes through book deals or movie rights. David Berkowitz was sentenced to 365 years in prison after pleading guilty to 6 counts of murder in 1978. He received 6 consecutive life sentences, ensuring that he would never be released. Berkowitz's name remained infamous, proving that the terror he inflicted had left a lasting mark on history. Thank you for watching Prison Stories. What do you think about the SonOfSam case? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the darkest corners of true crime, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.